Hello everyone, and you're very welcome to this webinar covering the core chemistry concepts for the Science T-Level qualification. Now, while this webinar will be focusing on the Science T-Level, there will still be relevance for those of you who are delivering the Health or Healthcare Science T-Levels, due to the similarities in the specification layout, some identical chemistry content, and I'll also be making some delivery suggestions too. Now, the plan for today's webinar is to first of all begin with some brief introductions and our collaboration with STEM Learning, an overview of the specification and how the assessments will work. We'll then look at the chemistry content and the depth required. We'll make some suggestions for delivering this content, the resources and support that we have available to you, and finally, to address any questions you may have. However, please do, throughout this webinar, type any questions you have into the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel, as I will be addressing these as we go through this webinar today. And also, you should see a handouts section. Please do download the slides that I'm going through today so that you may refer to them back for later reference. But first, I do want to begin with just a little poll, just to get a gauge of how confident you currently feel with the chemistry content, the teaching, the delivery, embedding skills, etc. With 1 being little to no confidence and 10 feeling very confident. So you should see that poll on your screen now. So you just click where you feel you are at the moment. You got about 67% of the votes in so far, 83% in now. It looks like it's quite a mixed bag. Most people actually do seem to be feeling confident. It looks like we got all the votes in. I'll close off this poll now and just show you the results. So half the people here are in the 7 to 8 bracket, so feeling pretty confident with the content, with delivery and so on. Good, and 33% in the 3 to 4. So hopefully after today's webinar, those who aren't feeling too confident will feel a little bit better about what's involved and what's required and so on. Right then, so just some very quick introductions. So my name is David Kiernan, and I work in the provider development team at NCFE. And I look after the health and science T-level route. And these webinars are actually part of a collaboration with STEM Learning. And we will be working closely with them, but one person in particular is Chris Carr, who is the network education lead. And as this webinar is part of a STEM Learning collaboration, I do want to highlight some of the webinars and events that have occurred and will also be upcoming. We have delivered some Prep to Teach events for those who are new to teaching the science T-level, and STEM Learning have provided some follow-up sessions to those. There's also been a webinar for the Maths core competencies, and again, further sessions with STEM Learning. As well as that, there was a session to do with the physics content in B1 and B2 of the specification, with further subject knowledge enhancement, or SKE, from STEM Learning. And last week, there was a biology webinar with a focus on the cells content. And this also will have subject knowledge enhancement from STEM Learning as well. As for today, we will be looking at the chemistry core content. And again, STEM Learning will be delivering some further subject knowledge enhancement on this. And there will also be some practical science too. So these are the sessions that are coming up, and a flyer will be in the handout section as well that you'll be able to download to join onto those sessions, and I will provide the link to these sessions as well. But first, I do want to begin with an overview of the T-level qualification, just so you are aware, in case anyone here is brand new to it, just so you have an overview of it. But if you want something more comprehensive, do please see one of our onboarding webinars. So what is a T-level? So T-levels are level 3, 2-year programs aimed at 16 to 19-year-olds. And they are equivalent in size, depth and rigor to 3 A-levels and do attract UCAS points as well. T-levels themselves are owned by the Institute for Apprenticeship and Technical Education, or IFATE, And the design and content of the T-levels came from employer panels in the relevant industries. Now, because of these employer panels, T-levels do offer students a route to paid employment. And because UCAS points are also available for the completion of a T-level, students can progress onto higher education or onto a higher level apprenticeship. Now, the entire design of the T-levels is to ensure that students have the threshold competency for the relevant occupational role. The specification itself can be divided into two sections, the core component and the occupational specialism content. So the core content is further divided, as shown on the screen, into three sections. Section A, working in the health and science sector. Section B, the scientific knowledge, concepts, and understanding of biology, chemistry, and physics. And the core skills. So this core content and skills form the foundations that the occupational specialism content is built upon. Now, some of this core content is also root core content, meaning it will be common to the health, science, and healthcare science T-levels. So the section A root content are the four elements shown on the screen there. And all of B1 is root content 2. Then we have the content and knowledge specific for an occupational role. And these are the occupational specialisms for the science T-level that will be live as of September 2021. Now, the content, knowledge, and skills will be different from one specialism to another. Again, it's all about having the threshold competency for that occupational role. And there's one other part of the technical qualification that I want to highlight, which is the general competency framework. And this lists the English, maths, and digital competencies that students will also be taught. Again, the focus is for students to have the threshold competency for the job role. And these competencies are assessed and are embedded as well within the specification. But it would be useful to help develop these further with your students. The T-level assessments themselves, they can be broken down into the core assessments and the occupational specialism assessments. So the core assessments consist of 2 written exam papers covering the core content in Section A and Section B, and an externally set skills assessment called an employer set project. It's called this as the tasks had input from employers to make them as realistic as possible. The occupational specialism is assessed in Year 2 with externally set synoptic assignments, which are also designed to be as occupationally realistic as possible. So we're now going to look at the chemistry knowledge and concepts that's within the science T-level. And some of this content, as I mentioned, is common to the health and healthcare science T-levels too. But just before we look at this, I would like to know who we actually have on today's webinar. So if you are delivering the science T-level, is there a particular occupational specialism that you will be delivering? Or if you are actually delivering health or healthcare science, please tick that option. So tick all the ones that apply from this little poll that's on the screen. So what is it that your center is actually delivering? It looks like we have quite a lot from health and healthcare science. So 67% of the votes in so far, and 25% of those here will be delivering laboratory sciences. Oh, got 83% of the votes in, so nearly all in. Looks like the majority of people here are actually going to be delivering health, and that's got to do with some suggestions for those who are delivering health as well. Just give another 5 seconds or so. See if we have any final little votes to come in. Okay, I'm going to close off that poll. As we can see, we do have quite a few people here. 60% of the people here are actually delivering health, then 40% lab sciences, 40% healthcare science. So that's good. So some of this is going to be relevant for those who are delivering health and healthcare science. What I will be speaking about will be relevant for you as well. And I will also be making some suggestions for those who are delivering health and healthcare science as well. So the focus is on the chemistry content in section B of the specification. Now, B1 has got 4 key chemistry headings as shown on this slide. Now, this B1 content is the root content. So everything in B1 also appears on the health and the healthcare science specifications too. The science T-level has further chemistry concepts in section B2 of the specification. Now, this B2 content isn't on the health T-level specification or on the health care science specification either. So that B2 content is unique to the science T-level. But everything in B1 appears on all 3 pathways. Now, for the science T-level, for the occupational specialism, there is further chemistry-related content within the occupational specialism section of the specification, and some examples are shown there. So if a section of the core part of the specification doesn't go into the depth you'd expect, then it's possible that that greater depth is actually within the occupational specialism content. Our focus for today, though, is just going to be on the core content within B1 and B2. And what might be useful to begin with is determining what knowledge and understanding of chemistry students should have from GCSE science. This will help you to gauge expectations, develop initial assessments and activities prior to actually delivering the chemistry content. Now, do bear in mind though, as we've had tags this year, and students will have varying experiences, etc., this GCSE content may not have been delivered to all students. And even without tags, the amount of knowledge and understanding that students will have retained from GCSE can always vary anyways. So this is the GCSE teaching content and not a guaranteed list of students' knowledge. And this is for those students who did combined science, sometimes called double award science as well. So in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel, you should find this document, the Science T-level Chemistry and Combined GCSE Chemistry content. And this contains a table outlining the chemistry content on the T-level beside the relevant content from the GCSE Combined Science. So do want you just to spend a couple of minutes having a look, it's on the screen there, at this content. If you download it and open it up, just 5 minutes, just so you can compare the materials and chemical properties that's on the science T-level with what would also have been covered at GCSE, that relevant content. So for example, we have content on here to do with the model and structure of an atom. How does that compare with the other bits to do with like the structure of the atom and so on? So how much should students have already covered at GCSE, for example? So do spend, like I said, just 5 minutes having a look through that, and I will check the question box during this time as well. So any questions that you do have, do pop them into the question box. I'm just going to mention a few of the questions that have come in thus far. So someone just asking in regards to the webinars themselves, where are these, where are the webinars? Because they weren't familiar with this webinar, they just happened to hear about it by chance from a colleague. We do have a provider support page, T-level provider support page, where we have our entire webinar schedule on there, as well as the registration links for those that are set up and ready to go. So I will be showing you that link and where to find those later on in today's webinar. And another person asking about any of the missed sessions, can we get recordings? Yep, recordings do get added to our YouTube channel. I will again provide a link for that later on in this webinar. They are on the slides. As well as that though, the registration link on the document that you use to register for today's webinar actually becomes a view recording link after the webinar has been done as well. So there's the 2 methods, either via the registration link, which becomes a view recording link, or on our YouTube channel, they will be added as well. So another question here, most of that is covered in GCSE. So what level should exam questions be posed, GCSE or A level, and where do we find example questions? Well, there are example questions on your QualHub subject page. So there is a sample exam papers on there, as well as different teaching and learning resources. I will mention them later. Now, in terms of the pitch, this is a level 3 qualification when we're thinking about science, for example. I will be talking about the depth required and how to read the specification later. And you will find that some of B1 is a very closely followed to GCSE, but there's greater depth in the B2 content. There is greater depth in the occupational specialism content, where you really see a lot of that level 3 content. Because remember, everything in B1 is root content. So that means it gets taught to science students and those who are doing health and those who are doing healthcare science. If we're taking a health student, for example, they wouldn't need the same depth of knowledge of physics, of chemistry, and even some elements of biology as well as those doing science would. So that's why you may not see that depth necessarily in the B1 content, but it may appear later in either the B2 content or in the occupational specialism content. And this question, our department is about to purchase combined exam pro. Will that be okay? I can't say yes or no to that, Martin. That will be down to your centre. That they won't contain questions related to NCFE. It's up to you to decide that. You might be better looking at the exam questions we have, and we'll be given some advice around how to use the specification to develop your own questions, access our teaching and learning materials that are on there as well, and so on. But I will be mentioning some of this later on as well. So another question here, one of the main things I'm unsure about is the depth of knowledge needed on various sections of the specification. Like atomic structure is very brief/vague, just suggests a need to know about the location of the subatomic particles. That's correct, that's what it speaks about. Are you expecting students to also have all the knowledge listed there from GCSE, e.g. being able to calculate numbers of SAPs? This I've just put on the GCSE content just purely for comparison, because not all students will have necessarily done combined GCSE science. This is just if your students are coming in with combined GCSE science, just let you know what they should have. It's not necessarily what they will have. You just focus on what the T-level specification says. That is what you have to deliver. So that table is just purely for comparison. If you have entry requirements, that means students need to have done GCSE science and had a certain grade. This is just to help you gauge that. That's all. It's not what you have to teach, but what's on the science T-level specification, that's what you have to deliver and that's what you have to teach. So with that in mind, let's actually have a look at the specification content. So I'm going to begin with the first part of B1, the chemistry content, which is the materials and chemical properties section. Now this is relevant for health and healthcare science. Remember, everything in B1 is root content. And possibly the easiest way to view the specification is to take the bold statement as the overall teaching outcome, and then the sub-bullet points are the depth. So if we take B1.33, students need to know about the relationship between the atomic structure of metals and their physical and chemical properties. And then these are the actual depth for the physical properties that's required. So these 3 physical properties is the depth you would have to go into. So here's another example where students have to understand the relationship between the structure and properties of composite materials. And then the depth for the structure and properties is given here. So now, while this is the depth required, you just need to know the structure made of 2 or more materials with different properties, and the properties themselves, strong, lightweight. So while that is the depth required, it is worth bearing in mind that students will need to be able to apply this knowledge as well, not just recall. So here would be a good opportunity for students to actually maybe compare and contrast different materials, justify the choice of a material for a given purpose, such as ceramics over composite materials or polymers, for example. And as this one was actually asked in the question, it's quite useful to actually highlight as well, is regarding the subatomic particles and their position in an atom. So for those of you who are very used to and familiar with delivering other level 3 science qualifications, you might cover the suborbital shells for electrons of SPD, etc. However, this isn't actually required with this specification point. All students would need to know is that protons are found in the nucleus, neutrons found in the nucleus, electrons in orbitals around the nucleus. So there's no requirement here to speak about SPD shells, etc. However, even though it's not required here, that doesn't mean you will never teach about it. In fact, it does appear much later on within the laboratory sciences occupational specialism, because it is relevant for that occupational role. And this is also worth noting for those of you who are delivering health, as I know that many providers out there are actually using science specialists. So it would be worth making them aware of this too. So with the section on acids, bases, and chemical changes, we use the same approach to reading the specification. So here, for example, students must know the physical and chemical properties of acids. And these are the physical and chemical properties that would need to be taught. So you view the specification in the same way. And you can actually develop questions by taking this same approach, by turning the bold statement into a question and then having the sub-bullet points as the answers, such as, what are the physical and chemical properties of acids? And then the answers you would expect from students are those sub-bullet points. For the B1 section on rates of reaction, I want to highlight one aspect here to do with the effect of temperature, B1.40. Again, we have the teaching point here and the depth. And much like the structure of the atom, there is no requirement here to teach about entropy, enthalpy, Gibbs free energy, etc. That is something you may expect to deliver in other level 3 science qualifications, but at this specification point, it is not required. Much like with the atomic structure, that doesn't mean it won't come up. In fact, it does come up later in the occupational specialism content. And for the final chemistry-related content in B1, we have the chemical analysis of substances. So here, students need to understand the principles of these tests and techniques. So for thin layer chromatography, the depth is that it's based on mixtures affinity for a mobile or stationary phase, can be used to detect the number of compounds present, and can be used to identify compounds and the purity. So that was the root content. And the remaining content will be in B2, further science concepts. Now this content here that I'm highlighting right now, this is unique to the science T level. And here you can see that some of this content is actually being developed out further from the content in B1, such as balancing equations, empirical formula, isotopes and moles appearing on here. So we're starting to see a greater amount of depth here in the B2 content as we become more specialized for the science T level. And here in B2, we can see there's further information to do with rates of chemical reactions, which goes beyond just the temperature that I mentioned in B1. So here we have the activation energy and the use of catalysts in reactions. And there is the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution for molecular energies. So here's where we start to see much more of this depth and much more at level 3 content related to the chemistry starting to appear. And finally, we have more information here on chemical analysis and different analytical techniques. Now, this includes further content as well on titrations, going much further beyond just the simple principles that was mentioned in B1 on the core science concepts. So here we can see that greater depth appearing in B2, becoming much more specialized for the science T-level pathway. So we are now going to have a look at the delivery of this actual content and provide some suggestions too. Now, there are different aspects to consider with your delivery, such as ensuring students have the threshold competency for the occupational role, and this would be worth keeping at the forefront of your mind. So as that, providing a holistic view for students and reinforcing the Section A content about working in the health and science sector where relevant, embedding the core skills and developing further opportunities for the general competencies of English, maths, and digital skills. Ensuring students can apply their knowledge as well and understandings to various different situations and scenarios. And of course, being teachers, myself being a teacher as well, ensuring students can succeed in their assessments as well, and being able to plan formative assessment opportunities. So what I'd like to give you an opportunity to do now is to actually share some ideas. So are there any particular activities that actually come to mind for you when delivering this? Would you combine some of the elements together from B1 and B2 to make delivery much more effective or efficient? Is there any of the Section A content that could be reinforced or embedded within the chemistry content? And for those who are delivering the health and healthcare science, what can we do to help set the relevance or contextualize the chemistry for those students in order to help keep them engaged? So what I'd like you to do, and I'm putting this a link directly in so you can all access this. I want you to click on the link that I've put into the chat to this Jamboard. And I'd like just to add your suggestions, a sticky note with your suggestions of what you could do. So in order to access this, you'll see right here, sticky note on this sidebar. So when you click on here, we'll just open up the sticky note here. By all means, change the color if you would like, a different color, and just type in your suggestion. And then hit save and automatically goes there. Just click cancel so we can see this one here. So do click on the sticky note there just to add your suggestions. Again, give you about 5 minutes to have a look at this, and I will be looking at the question box again just to see if there's any questions that need answering. I'll get rid of my sticky note. Already got a suggestion in, fantastic. Just as those suggestions are coming in, questions been asked. So it sounds like you're saying that what's written on the spec is literally all you need to know. However, some of the sample exam questions go into more detail. So an example, we'll have to have a look at this question in a moment. Question 15B and C on the healthcare science. So how do we know how much depth to go into? So one of the things, we'll have a look at that question in a moment, is this is the depth, this is what you have to teach, the specification, and that is the depth required. Remember though, that students still need to be able to apply that knowledge, be able to analyze and evaluate as well. When it comes to the assessments, there's basically 3 types of questions that's on the assessment papers. One of them is called an AO1 or Assessment Objective 1, which is the recall and apply knowledge type questions. AO2, Assessment Objective 2, is more the applying the knowledge aspects. So that's where just recalling the knowledge won't be enough. They would need to know how to apply it to different situations. And then we have the AO3 type questions, which is analysis and evaluate style questions, where they may need to have to know what impact something will have. So they could be given a scenario and then have to think about, well, using my knowledge, what effect could this have? Now, without looking at the question 15 sounds like it might be one of those higher level ones, because as you go through the sections and the papers, the difficulty does increase. So that is a depth, looking at the specification, that is the depth required, but students being able to apply that knowledge, to be able to analyze, evaluate, know what impact could come from different scenarios, that's where some of the questions also contain that sort of elements. And I'm just going to have a look at the suggestions that we've had that's come in so far. So I will be doing some B1 and B2 together. Excellent indeed. Some of those elements from B1 and B2 do fit nicely together. So kidney supporting regulation of acid. Okay, so this in terms of maybe a more biological one. Of acid-base balance in blood. Requires knowledge of the chemistry involved. Absolutely. Good. Prosthetics, constructions, and carbon fiber, knee replacements. Good. So just make sure I haven't hit anything. I'm still covering paper A, so not decided how to cover the chemistry yet. That's fine. So I'm a chemist, so not too concerned about that. That's good. Already done practicals in reactions. Okay, reactions of group 1 metals with water, transition metals, measuring pH, strong, weak, diluted, concentrated acids. Good. So planning further practicals for titrations, rates of reaction. Absolutely good. Oh, you've already talked about the SPDF subshells. That's fine. As relevant to the transition metals. Yep, there's nothing wrong with going beyond the specification. That greater depth, stretch and challenge, good. And practicals done on group 1 reactions with water, group 7 displacement reactions, good. So ionic material and transport mechanisms in the body not link nicely together. Oh, indeed, yes. Ion, oh, yes, indeed. That's I might make a note of that one myself. That's a nice, nice one to add. Okay then. So just going to go back to sharing my screen here. So we've had quite a few different suggestions here. Here's some of my suggestions in terms of the combinations that could be done with the Bs to make delivery a bit more efficient with this section B. So the B1 content on materials and chemical properties, in particular the B1.33 on group 1 and transition metals, could be combined nicely with the content in B2 on formula and equations, such as group 1 reactions and balancing equations. So the B1 and B2 content related to rates of reaction, to catalysts, to temperature, activation energy, etc., can be combined very easily as well, as can the content related to chemical analysis of substances and the chemical and analytical techniques as well. Now, for those of you who are delivering health or healthcare science T-level, then I've put on the screen just a few suggestions for setting the relevance, and we've already had some other suggestions there to help set the relevance for your students. Now, this can be just as simple as helping to set the scene. For example, telling students that medical implants and prosthetics can be made from different materials. So we're going to learn a little about the chemistry of these materials. Something as simple as that can really help. Now, I'll not read through all of these, but please do download the slides from the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. And also, if you did miss the physics content webinar for the science T-level, then please do view that on our YouTube channel, as there were suggestions just like this made for the core physics content and how to contextualize it to a health or biological setting as well. Now, for section A, when it comes to that element, there are many different areas that can be reinforced within the chemistry teaching, such as health and safety, cost regulations, the use of PPE, etc. But there's also some Section A content with more of a chemistry focus on the science T level, such as these ones here on the content on equipment and surfaces, and using dissolution and neutralization for decontamination, the incorrect storage leading to degradation of reagents, the use of pipettes for measuring matter at a microscale. You'll find even more examples within the section A10 on the science T level on experimental equipment and techniques. So this content lists some of the equipment that is used for scientific techniques, handling substances, and conducting measurements accurately. For example, the use of a fume cupboard, pH meters, analytical balances, etc. Now, you may also find it useful to actually embed the core skills within the delivery of the chemistry content. And also, any additional opportunities to help develop the English, maths, and digital competencies would really help students with being job ready, with their assessments, and having that threshold competency. So what I'd like you to do as well, just another chance to share ideas, is under the different headings on the Padlet. I'm going to put the link directly into the chat box as well, so you can all have access to it, to add in your suggestions for the English, maths, and digital competencies, for the core skills, and so on. So where do you think some of the core skills could be developed and included within the chemistry teaching? What about for English, maths, and digital? And then just a little box if there's any other suggestions that you may have as well. Then again, I will provide my own suggestions, but your suggestions are far more valuable. Straight away, lovely balancing equations. Thank you very much. So again, about 5 minutes or so, just to have a look at this. Okay, just gonna have a look at the suggestions that we've had in so far. And as I said, I will make a few suggestions as well, but so far, so for core skills, presenting complex information to a variety of audiences. Yeah, absolutely, that is one of the core skills, definitely. Students trying to link cross-curricular, particularly with physics. Okay, linking some of the stuff related to chemistry and physics together, absolutely. So English, whenever we meet a new term, which is quite a lot in science. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry. Yes, I understand. Sorry. Yes. So for the core skills, so the new terminology and so on, emphasizing that. Excellent. So the importance of correct spelling of scientific terminology, and especially the chemicals, compounds, etc. Good. Yep, incorrect spelling in the workplace could cause serious incidences. I like that. It's linking into that threshold competency job role. That's very good. Maths, balancing equations, everything as well. Definitely with the science T level, there is lots of opportunities, I suppose. Measuring with precision for practicals, absolutely. Something as simple as that, just making sure they can measure something accurately. That is one of the maths competencies, being able to measure with precision. So for digital, process and analyze numerical data, using data from rate reaction practicals to draw graphs on Excel. Excellent, good. I'm liking that comment there, sorry, one that's just come in. Maths is just another way of saying science, indeed. Well, my own background is physics in particular, so I'd certainly agree with that statement. So let's have a look at a few suggestions that I have here myself, beginning with the core skills. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these, but I'm going to highlight just a few of them, just a couple here. So for project management, core skill 1, this is probably going to be the newest one, and you may find it easier to set project-based questions with students, such as determining which is the most efficient and cost-effective method for increasing rates of reaction. So students could be given different costs for the product, cost for catalysts, or even have to research them themselves. Maybe it's a cost for additional heating to raise the temperature, so temperature cost per Kelvin, etc., and have to do some financial analysis. But then maybe also considering efficiency and the fact that they'd have larger quantities to sell, and whether this makes the additional costs worth it. Is it going to be profitable? And this can even then include risk assessments related to this in terms of their project management. And it would be worth using the risk matrix and the risk template that's actually in the employer set project brief to get students used to that sort of layout as well. For researching, and especially for those doing health or healthcare science, students could look into the different types of material and the possibility of using them for medical implants. For creativity and innovation, this can be around some of the equipment and techniques. For example, maybe the use of digital pH meters over indicators. And even for titrations, maybe have students actually perform titrations using universal indicator first, then get them to suggest what the issue is, why are they having trouble finding that exact point with that procedure, before discussing a more appropriate type of indicator, such as phenolphthalein. For the general competencies, this will often be included within some of the core skills elements, but there's a few more suggestions that I've got on the screen there as well. So for English, students could practice writing standard operating procedures, which would be synthesizing and summarizing information. To convey technical information to different audiences, as was mentioned on the Padlet, students could have to explain the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution for professionals and for the general public, or maybe for younger students. There's already some specific maths content in the specification, such as calculating reaction rates, working out the molecular formula, etc. But even, as was put on the Padlet as well, measuring with precision, that's part of it, and even communicating using mathematics also form part of the general maths competencies. And the digital competencies include the production of text documents, presentations, etc., and can include simpler aspects as well, such as being safe and responsible online. Another one, though, is to do with the processing and analyzing numerical data, which is where you could incorporate the use of spreadsheets. So that's just a few suggestions for those elements. And we're now actually just going to finish off on some of the support and resources that's available to you. So I'm going to talk through these resources that's currently available, and some more that's actually in development from NCFE, and even what some third-party organizations are doing. Now, our contents team have developed and made available example schemes of work for the core content, as well as teaching resources to help with delivery. Now, there are the essentials teaching resources, which will be free, and we do have additional resources available as well, which will be on a yearly license. And these resources will contain e-learning resource or presentation, activity sheets or home study sheets, which will be interactive PDFs as well, and a session plan to accompany the e-learning resource. And aside from these resources, HODR are producing a textbook for the health T-level and for the science T-level. And this is due for release in early 2022. So HODR's website as well is on there. STEM Learning have actually got a T-level resource page as well. And this page is broken into Section A and Section B of the specification and contains links to various resources. And there's also another section on there for the general maths competencies. And while the focus of this page will be for the science T-level, you will find content relevant to the health and healthcare science T-levels too, since some of this content is shared, the root content. In terms of our webinars and training, we have an interactive PDF containing our upcoming events. So that's the first page of the PDF shown on screen now. And it has planned sessions for the duration of your T-level program delivery. So I've got the second page on there, which does break up the support we offer into pre-onboarding, onboarding, and further CPD, such as this event. So you can find the schedule and other key information on the T-level provider support page, that first link that's shown on there. And you can view our past webinars either through the PDF, the registration link, becomes a view recording link, or on our YouTube playlist. As for STEM learning and the follow-up T-level CPD they are doing, they have their own CPD platform where you can view and book onto the upcoming sessions. And again, there may be some relevant sessions for those delivering health and healthcare science too, but you will need to register with STEM learning first in order to book onto these sessions. Also in the handout section, you'll be able to access and download a flyer related to these sessions too. Now this slide here provides information just regarding some of the key contacts. So our customer support team, they're often the first line of inquiry for general queries, portal logins, registering students, etc. As for me, I'm your contact for support relating to the teaching and learning and CPD sessions. So we have my direct email there, but if I'm unavailable, our general email address, provider.development. And the account managers are support centers with the business of delivering T-levels. And centers do find having that singular point of contact quite valuable. In terms of the work with STEM, they have their general email address for general inquiries, which I've shown on there, but also Chris Carr's email is on there too. I just want to finish off before looking at any final questions, just with a poll again, just to see how you're feeling now regarding the chemistry content. I know quite a few people were already fairly confident with this. Again, 1 being not too confident, 9 to 10 being very confident. Just where would you put yourself at the moment? It's got 75% of the votes in. So we have 67% of people in the 7 to 8 bracket. 33, some people still in the 3 to 4. That's okay. Do ask your questions then. If there's something that's still not sure about, please ask. That is the most important thing during this session right now. Okay, I'm just going to close off that poll. So as I said, so we don't have anyone in the 5 to 6 bracket we did previously. Some people still in the 3 to 4, 67% in the 7 to 8 at the moment. So going to remain on here for the remaining few minutes to address any final questions you may have. However, if you don't have any questions, then I would like to thank you very much for attending today, and do feel free to leave, but there is going to be a little evaluation that pops up when you leave. Really appreciate if you spend a few moments just filling that in. Your feedback is vital to us. And if you are leaving now, then from everyone here at NCFE, we want to wish you a very safe and successful year. So one of the questions here, when are the teaching resources for chemistry going to become available? I'll have to double check the schedule. I know our account exec sent out a link showing the schedule for release of different resources and so on. I know there are some B1 resources already available. So I don't know without looking at that link myself, but the account exec sent out that schedule of release. I know there is more to be released at the end of this month as well. So another question here, will there be more sample exam questions being released? So there's just the plan at the moment is just for the 1 sample exam paper. So a paper for section A and 1 for section B. But remember, some of this content is root content. So if you, Catherine, for example, are delivering the science T-level, you can go onto the health T-level page and actually use some of the questions from their papers with your students because of some of the common content, the B1, for example. And the same with the healthcare science. You could get some of the questions from there. Also, do remember that you can use the specification the way I suggested. Change the bold point, change the bold statement on the specification into a question. And that way you can make then the sub bullet points the answers. And again, find opportunities to maybe develop them into apply type questions or develop scenarios as well around them. Just having another look at any of the questions that's come in. So just one other question that's come in here. We pay for more exam type questions. No, you're not paying for any, you don't pay for any extra exam type questions whatsoever. There is, like I said, the sample paper A, there's sample paper B on your Qualify page, where there's no additional questions that you have to pay for that will be coming out. So I'm not sure what you mean there. Nikki, so I would pay for more exam questions too. Yeah, well, we're not that's I can pass this feedback along, of course, and I will, but the moment it's just going to be the one sample paper. Like I said, try and use the specification to your advantage and develop scenarios and situations. For example, if we took the chemical analysis of substances, maybe give a scenario and students have to then choose what is the correct method. Is it is it thin layer chromatography? Is it to do with gas chromatography, etc.? So apply a situation this way. This is the type of analysis that needs to be done. What technique should be used, and justify it. So little tweaks like that, things like this, might be the best way of using the specification to your advantage. So Martin, you don't feel the exemplar relates to the specification. Again, it's to do with those assessment questions, because you do have to be able to apply and analyze knowledge. I will bring up the specific one that was mentioned actually, just to show that example there. Because the bigger aspect definitely is to do, you can teach this knowledge, and I'm sure we've all used to this, being able to you can teach the knowledge to students and they can recall it fine, but being able to apply it to a new situation, a different situation, that's where it's a real test if they fully understood the knowledge. Being able to recall stuff is one thing, being able to then apply that knowledge is something, is that extra depth. So one of those questions, Matt, I don't know if you're delivering healthcare science or not, but just as this was one of the ones that was mentioned. If we looked at question 15, I believe it was. So state what the two following types of chromatography are used for. So this one here, just state what they're used for. So column chromatography and gas chromatography. So that one is much more straightforward, an AO1 type question, just to recall knowledge. So one used for single chemical compound from a mixture, and the other used to separate and analyze compounds that can be vaporized. So it's just a recall knowledge one here. Then just regarding the chromatography, why are these aspects essential? And this ties in from many other areas of the specification as well. So being able to put on plastic gloves, prevent contamination, and so on. And these sort of aspects being added on there. So when the solvent is added to developing tank, the pencil line. So why is that the case? All these sort of little things. So solvent otherwise might be too deep, dissolve the mixture from the plate, and so on. So this is just still tying in with this, being able to analyze and know why these are done, just ties in. This is the applying knowledge, being able to apply their knowledge to this. So being able to recall the facts, that's fine, but then they just apply their knowledge on chromatography here. And here we get into the analysis and evaluate style question in AO3. So again, you will have just taught them what's on the specification. They then have to be able to analyze and suggest reasons. So they know about thin layer chromatography. So these students follow procedure. One shows 3 amino acids, another shows 2. Explain, give a reason. Why might this be? So this is where they have to think about it. Or did they take it out too soon, perhaps? And it hadn't fully, and again, thinking about as was mentioned there, the mobile phase, stationary phase, etc. They took it out of the solvent too soon, and they maybe didn't fully separate. So that there, the specification of what you teach hasn't changed. Students just need to now apply that knowledge, evaluate just to that question. So it's still the same depth, but it's higher demand, especially as we move through the sections on the students, having to recall knowledge, AO1 style questions, AO2, assessment objective 2, applying their knowledge, like in this previous one, and AO3, higher demand is AO3, the analysis and evaluate style questions, which is what they have to do here. Why might there have been 3? So they still have the knowledge, they have to analyze and evaluate there. So some questions still coming in regarding this, not sure. I'll tell you what, best thing might be, you have my email address, email me directly and I can link in our assessment design team. If there's something that any particular questions, any particular ones that you're particularly not sure about. But as I said, the assessment objectives is where it comes out. You would teach them that depth, what's on there, and by all means, you can go further beyond the specification in some cases. But then students need to be able to apply that knowledge. And the biggest one and the hardest one definitely is assessment objective 3, being able to analyze and evaluate. That's always the tougher one. So as you put in here, Catherine, with the thin layer chromatography, so the things you would teach, it's used to separate, from the specification based on their affinity for a mobile or stationary phase, used to detect the number of compounds, used to identify the compounds and their purity. So that's what you would teach them. And then, just as you put in there, used to detect the number of compounds, that's where it suddenly starts to bring in the AO3. Well, there isn't the same number of compounds. So students trying to be able to analyze and evaluate based on what you've taught them does sort of come into that element there. So they know how the chromatography works. But as I said, if because of these little messages, in case I'm not fully understanding, do email me. You do have my email address, and I can pass on any queries and so on to our assessment design team. One of the things is I have to be kept completely separate from our assessment design team due to a conflict of interest because I speak directly with centres. It would be inappropriate for me to know more specific stuff about the live assessments in case I revealed something that was going to be on them. So you can email me any specific queries and I can pass along to them to get a response as well. So as that, you do have your account exec as well, who will be able to help out too. So any queries to me, your account exec, we want you to be supported. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions coming in at the moment. In that case, I do want to again thank you all very much for attending, and I do hope you found this session useful. And if you still have questions, please don't hesitate to get in contact. The best thing is to actually email directly, and we'll be able to follow up on any further queries you have after this. Do make sure you download the materials in the handout section as well. And if you go complete the little evaluation that pops up, that would be very much appreciated. In the meantime, though, from everyone here at NCFE, we do want to wish you a very safe and successful year.